All right, good morning, everybody. It's about 10:02. I see that people are still trickling in onto the call, but we have quite a bit to get through today. So I think we'll go ahead and get started now. So welcome to today's SunSpec webinar, co-hosted with Intersolar and Energy Storage North America. Today we'll be looking at what's next in 2026 and tying it back into what's out in the SunSpec Alliance and in the industry in 2025 as well. My name is Dylan Tanzi. I'm the Executive Director of the SunSpec Alliance. You can see my contact information on the screen. And I thank you all for joining us today. Looks like we're going to have a great audience here in attendance. First things first, some housekeeping items. All SunSpec meetings are conducted in accordance with the SunSpec antitrust policy and intellectual property provisions defined in the SunSpec member agreement. This agreement can be found at the following address. SunSpec strictly prohibits market participants and their employees who take part in these activities from using their participation as a forum for engaging in practices or communications that violate antitrust laws. Confidential or proprietary information should not be discussed in open session. Please contact SunSpec management if you have any questions. Some additional housekeeping items. I'll just note that this meeting is being recorded, so please do keep yourself, this meeting is being recorded, and there's an open mic as well. So you do have the ability to unmute yourself or even turn your cameras on, but please do keep yourself on mute and keep your video off to keep the background chatter to a minimum. And also the deck will be distributed after this meeting, as is frequently asked. And normally during these webinars, I do encourage active participation, but like I said, we do have quite a bit to get through today. So I'm gonna ask that we hold questions till the end. I'm gonna do my best to be efficient and leave about 10 minutes for discussion and Q&A. But for the duration of the body of the webinar, please go ahead and enter any comments or questions in the chat, and then we'll open up the floor, hopefully time allowing, at the end. So this webinar is being held in conjunction with Intersolar and Energy Storage North America, which is going to be in San Diego from February 18th to 20th. We're going to be there. We'll have a booth. Our booth number is 4017, so we'll be right inside the doors at the top of those stairs in the San Diego Convention Center. And we have this discount code available to you all here at this webinar, and to members, if you're on our newsletters, use the code SunSpec to secure 20% off discount on conference pass or free exhibit hall access. In addition, while we're going to be at Intersolar, we'll also be hosting a panel with myself, Mark Ortiz of Schneider Electric, Vish Ganti of DER Security Corp, and Dr. Dante Splendorio of Critical Loop. Also, we'll be hearing during this webinar from Vish at some point, when we get to some topics that he's working on. And we'll be hearing from Rob from Intersolar at the end of this webinar as well. The purpose of both this panel and this webinar is to look at a couple, first of all, the macro trends in the DER industry and the standard space. We're looking at standards development as they and the role that they play in the DER industry as we go through this period where the technology and the industry is going through the process of diffusion, and we're reaching a point of critical mass of deployment and technology development where standards inevitably play a very significant role. We'll also be looking at the significant drivers of demand for our demand for energy, aka new loads coming online, particularly in the space of AI data centers and electric vehicles. And the other major macro trend of cybersecurity becoming not just a buzzword, but becoming an issue of national security and national competitiveness as well. You know, as we observe these macro trends of the expansion contraction of the DER industry, often known as the solar coaster, it's a common practice for companies to take a wait and see approach, to see what technical standards emerge or what policy standards emerge. And it's my opinion that that is a mistake. And it's the companies and the individuals who actively take part in defining and shaping the development of standards and leading the deployment of these standards that are ultimately going to be the quote unquote winners and claiming the greatest market share as we go from having large numbers of new entrants into the industry and then having that contraction period, those regular contraction periods back down. So my objective and our objective in going through these macro trends is to help inform your kind of micro level corporate strategies as to how you're going to engage with the development, deployment standards and the development, employment of policies related to not only interconnection, but also cybersecurity, national security, and national competitiveness. And with that, let's get to it. Like I said, we have a lot to do. Ultimately, I hope that by going through these macro trends, informing your corporate strategies, business development strategies, that you'll come and join SunSpec. You'll come and join us to discuss more deeply all these topics at the panel at Intersolar, and come see us at our booth. So we're going to go through a series of topics looking at the various activities that SunSpec has been engaging with in 2025 and where they're going in 2026 and beyond. Again, look at the macro trends and the individual developments and initiatives. So we'll be hearing from Vish Ganti from DR Security Corp. Tom will also chime in on, Vish will talk about the 2030.5 and AI data centers and drivers of demand and load. Tom will be discussing some of the applications in terms of electric vehicles. Sam Reed of SunSpec, our marketing VP of Marketing and Content, will discuss some of the marketing and membership activities, as well as Aaron Mahan of SunSpec will discuss some SunSpec membership activities as well. And finally, like I said, we'll hear from Rob from Intersolar at the end. So let's just get into it. So starting with Secure SunSpec Modbus. This is a new development that came out at the end, just got finalized, a new specification that got finalized at the end of 2025. And the specification was approved in December, just a month ago. And we're seeing this transition from traditional Modbus, where Modbus networks traditionally have not been secured. They've only been accessible at the local level, at the plant level or system level. But we're seeing with the development and deployment of standards like 1547 in the US and parallel standards internationally, that Modbus, there's an appetite for potentially connecting to these communication interfaces remotely over the internet. And when that happens, of course, those connections must be secured. This SunSpec standard is based on the long-standing Modbus TCP standard that has always existed. You could always, if you wanted to connect to a Modbus interface over the internet, use the Modbus TCP standard. But we've defined this profile in terms with Secure SunSpec Modbus for the specific use case of the DER industry, and introduce additional features, including role-based access control that is tailored to support other international standards, and like IEEE 62351-8, which is an important international standard governing role-based access control and securing who has access to these systems. This new standard, this development is really important because if you're going to be communicating to or connecting to a Modbus interface over the internet, then it must be secured. This is introducing new use cases, making new business models, opening potential new business models, and also opening potential new revenue streams. So this is an exciting opportunity as the standards are more broadly deployed for you and your business and your business strategies. Additionally, moving on to IEEE 2030.5. So California has done a great job of mandating certifications for CSIP and the 2030.5 networks. And we're seeing that these first deployments of 2030.5 capable systems go into their first deployments here in California. They're already gone into place in Australia, and we're seeing movement in other countries like Europe and India and multiple Asian countries in Asia as well, adopt and starting to deploy these 2030.5 networks. I think in 2026, we're really going to see we're getting real signals, the first real use cases and applications are being deployed here in California as well, with programs like the Flex Connect program. This QR code in the top right that you see there is a link to a blog post that we put out at the end in December last month, detailing one of these first deployments here in California. So I know we've been supporting manufacturers for many years as they build up their technical capabilities in 2030.5. It's been a very, very frequently asked questions: when are these going to actually be used? Because most people got CSIP certified for California, and so we're really excited to say that it's really is going into effect here in 2026, and we're seeing more vendors come online on the PKI infrastructure as well. In addition, SunSpec on the technical development side has been leading the CSIP test procedures update to comply with the updated 23.5 standard. The previous version of CSIP was based on 23.5 2018. There's now a 23.5 2023 version as well. So which necessitates the update to CSIP and the CSIP test procedures. And so this is a very important activity. As we're seeing real deployments go into place, this is your opportunity to play a role in developing the next iteration of this important standard. And like I said at the opening, it is the individuals and companies who actively contribute or lead the way in developing these standards and deploying these standards that ultimately claim the greatest market share as this technology diffuses and are able to more easily navigate and survive as we go through these quote unquote solar coaster, this pattern of expansion and contraction that we've seen over the years in the DER industry. At this point, I do want to invite Vish Ganti to add some commentary here. He's going to be one of our panelists at Intersolar, and this is an area that he works extensively in. So he's going to talk a bit about this as well as the next topic of 20.5 and AI data centers. So Vish, why don't you offer a few comments? Let me know when you'd like me to click through the slides.
Thank you, Dylan, and good morning, everybody. Such an exciting group of folks to be talking to. First of all, I wanted to talk a little bit about this blog and what we really try to connect the dots here. Standards are standards. There are capabilities inside devices. These are all functions that are supposed to be supported by these devices. But the reality is these market products, the utility-facing market products of the programs, both in virtual power plants as well as grid services, there's a big divide between the capability of the device and how it's actually enabling these market products to come to life. So case in point, historically, when you thought about demand response or demand flexibility, we resorted to using OpenADR as a protocol. We've done other non-standard protocols or APIs. But when we talk about frequency response or droop curve control, we resort to some SunSpec Modbus or the 1547 capabilities. What we try to do in this blog is to show how all of these use cases can be unlocked with a unified protocol, including things like pricing. How do you take prices that are published by utilities and send them to devices using 2030.5 pricing function set, although that's not included in the original CSIP, but it's a capability nonetheless inside of standard. Similarly, flexible service connections that rely heavily on dynamic operating envelopes or export limits or flexible limits were not included in CSIP, but they are part of 2030.5. So the blog really tries to aim to bring together these diverse perspectives and observations in the industry to show how effectively one could use 2030.5 to unlock these use cases. Now, that being said, As we look at the future of the adoption of this protocol in the US and the changes that we're about to introduce, we're making it such that the standard and the interfaces are useful for existing programs that are commercially available. So that creates value to the consumers for buying these products, creates value to the utilities by lowering integration costs and unlocking market-facing value streams and use cases. I've seen a lot of written about value stacking since 2016. Reality that has not happened, because we end up building bespoke integrations for each use case. In my view, after being in this space for quite some time, 23.5 is the only protocol and the true protocol that unlocks the value stacking in the most easiest way. So please go check it out. I posted the link in the chat as well. Now, with respect to why this is timely and important, just to shed some light on this, about roughly over 90 to 95% of the energy that was activated in 2025 globally came from inverter-based resources, primarily solar, but also battery storage and other IBRs. And 2030.5 and 1547 are the language and the settings and the grammar for those inverter-based systems. That's why we think the inflection point is here with respect to the amount of DERs that we're finding on the grid. And one interesting fact is that as the volume of DER increases, the complexity and the data that they generate is exponentially more difficult to manage. So while the deployment of DERs might be linear, or they grow linear year over year, the data and the volume of data is exponential from the systems. That's the complexity that we're trying to really address. And like I said in my opening remarks, the value stacking unfortunately requires you to build a lot of custom logic. But when you encapsulate that inside of the protocol itself, you reduce the need for over-optimizing, is what I call it. It's not even optimizing. At this point, we're over-optimizing for a problem that should have actually been handled more elegantly at the protocol level. So the time is now. It's an inflection point. And with the amount of demand growth, load growth that's happening in the United States and around the world due to AI data centers, electrification of e-mobility, I think this problem is only going to get more and more complicated. And utilities are going to resort to deploying DERs for a faster, lower cost upgrade to their electrical system as a whole.
And we're going to be looking at the drivers for growing demand, like we mentioned before, with AI data centers and electric vehicles. But I'm going to put a fine point on, I think what Vish is pointing to is with the complexity and the volume of data being generated from these new systems being introduced. That's exactly where the reliance on standards and need for predictable implementation is of vital importance. With the complexity, in order to get scale, you need a common understanding, common methodology for communicating and managing that complexity.
Thanks.
So, yeah. So I'm going to hand it off back to Vish again to talk about AI data centers, another core area that he's been leading the charge in and helping us understand the different load curves and other complexities with this new type of load. But this is one of the big drivers for the growing deployment of inverter-based resources and DERs, as Vish mentioned, 92%. Even with this solar coaster, 92% of new generations is inverter-based resources. That's a figure from the U.S. actually in 2025, and that actually maps very closely to the global trends as well. And this is one of the big drivers along with electric vehicles. Vish, please help us understand some of the complexities and nuances that go along with this type of load.
Absolutely. So let me first contrast and give you a case of what happens with data centers today and how it's changing with AI becoming front and center of it. Historically, when you saw data centers, the loads were very flat. They were not too spiky because the systems didn't come online up and down that fast. Imagine like your Gmail, your photos. Those are things that people do, and the systems that are operated with a very constant load profile. In contrast to what's happening with AI data centers, there's really two workload types. One is inference, which is like when you send a ChatGPT query, you're inferring, you're running the model. So it's running the model, versus model training, where you're actually training the model itself. These are two broad categories of inference and the workloads. Can you maybe just stay on the previous slide?
Sorry.
So when these AI workloads come online, whether it's model training or even inference to some extent, the amount of the load spikes that you see on the data centers, the intense ramps, are pretty significant. In a few seconds, they could just spike all the way and then drop by 15, 20 megawatts. And also, just to put a finer point on this, the amount of load in a data center also changed. Historically, if you were running a 100 megawatt data center, you're running a big ship, right? That was considered a very sizable asset. Most average smaller data centers are 20, 30, 50 megawatts range. Now, that sounds very small. Today's data centers, we're talking 500 megawatts, gigawatts, upwards of a couple of gigawatts. Those are the announcements that we saw in 2025. And some of that will manifest and come to life, others may not. But the key point here is that when you have a 500 megawatt data center, the ramp is somewhere between 50 to 100 megawatts in instance of seconds, right? So that kind of a ramp is something is very hard to manage. Typically, especially for systems that are using on-site generation with turbines. So what we're seeing a lot in the industry is deploying batteries to smooth out and be faster responsive, faster ramping resources to supply energy to these complex machines. So as model training comes up and down, or the workloads go up and down, the battery systems or fuel cells or other inverter-based technologies effectively are being used to address smoothing out of these intense ramps and fluctuations. And this is an opportunity for everybody at SunSpec as a member. If you're an OEM making batteries, utility scale, or even a few megawatt scale batteries, this is an opportunity you should be closely paying attention to as to how you can demonstrate your capabilities with using open standards and open protocols. Because quite honestly, a data center is a good Tetris of equipment from hundreds of manufacturers and OEMs, both on the compute side, also on the cooling and other infrastructure side. So the main point here is we're dealing with tens to hundreds of megawatts of intense ramps. It's not easy to manage it, and inverters and batteries are a key component of how those workloads get smoothed out. Next slide. So here's an example of how a frequency excursion, and especially how these things work, stabilizing the energy system. What you're seeing there is actually on the left side, when it's at nominal or zero, like no load, and suddenly you see these intense ramps with systems coming on and back on and back off. And then there's a period where there's checkpointing or slowdown of the workload, and then the system comes down, and again it goes back. And so these are all programmable features inside of inverters, smart inverters. You can change the ramp rate controls, group curves to address this particular use case for smoothing. Next slide. So this leads to how. One of the fundamental things we're observing also is that this notion of flexible data centers or grid responsive data centers. This is an area of personal favorite of mine because I spent time at Lawrence National Lab almost 12 years ago studying the ability of smart grid interactive data centers. And it really is now coming to life. Although I have not seen a lot of data centers historically participating in demand response, but because of interconnection delays and the speed to power, they are adopting to becoming more grid responsive and flexible. Otherwise, they can go back and wait in the queue, right? So to get faster interconnection access, utilities are mandating that these data centers are grid responsive, which implicitly mean the DERs and energy assets are grid responsive. So either they're supplying to the grid or they're soaking up excess energy from the grid. All those are options based on the grid conditions. But the site level optimization of how you meet the load requirements are something that the data center operators are trying to innovate on. So speaking to utilities, here in California particularly, they're looking at using IEEE 2030.5 for medium voltage and low voltage grid connections, and also larger systems, honestly, maybe even using DNP3 or other protocols. Ultimately, to make these assets grid responsive, these assets come on faster and also become a load to the grid. Next slide. So that's the high level on the data center load growth. I want to see if Dylan, you or Tom can come in and talk about the VTG side.
Yeah, I'll offer a couple comments, and then I will ask Tom to join in as well.
Sure.
So along with AI data centers, vehicle to grid applications in electric vehicles are the other major growth area for load growth, and therefore demand for DERs and for inverter-based resources. And in fact, electric vehicles are themselves a DER as well. And so SunSpec has been, and its members have been actively working on developing and refining the protocol standards to support the connection between electric vehicles, between EVSEs, and between electric vehicles and EVSEs, and EVSEs, and between utilities and grid operators. So we've been working on this use case and application in two SunSpec work groups, in the SunSpec 23.5 CSIP test procedures work group and SunSpec Modbus work group as well, where we're developing 23.5 profiles for SAE standard, the SAE standard J3072, as well as 23.5 profiles for ISO 15118, and then applications of SunSpec Modbus and the J3068, SAE J3068 standard as well. So these are all SAE and ISO standards that include or govern the communications, that include the requirement for these protocols. And SunSpec has been, along with its members, have been working on developing the profile and compliance criteria that will allow vendors and manufacturers to obtain their compliance and achieve the vital interoperability that needs to really actually appear in the deployment phase. With that, I will invite Tom to offer a few additional comments in this area.
Thank you, Dylan. Now we'll keep my comment short because we're about halfway through and there's a lot more to cover. First of all, thank you very much for attending today. It was nice to see the nice crowd come out. So vehicle to grid and electric vehicles. First of all, I think the news of the electric vehicles demise was premature, I believe, because it's done nothing but take off globally, and it's more or less continued apace here in the United States as well. Now, policies change from day to day, but the need to put this infrastructure in place, it does not change. And the adoption of electric vehicles and vehicle to grid, specifically in the package delivery field and automated driving and now even in long haul transportation, is in fact developing more or less as the industry had hoped. And so SunSpec plays a key role here, as Dylan said, in terms of the applying the IEEE 23.5 standard such that we can address and manage the tremendous load growth that comes from charging, but also to use these vehicles as a grid support function and to allow these vehicles to play in ancillary markets by perhaps even selling back services or providing backup power in your home in the case of natural disasters. In the larger vehicle space, SunSpec, as Dylan mentioned, is the interface for the medium duty and for the heavy duty charging. So where we're driving tremendous amounts of load, such that quite often these types of systems may be even connected to transmission. We'll see about that. But the point is that the future is bright here, and SunSpec is doing great work both here and abroad. We're collaborating with our European partners to make sure that we have global standards.
Thanks, Tom.
Next, please.
Oh, yes, one more.
All right. Yeah. Well, so why it matters. If you combine the load from AI data centers and in electric vehicles, it's unprecedented in the history of the world how much load is coming online. So there's no way that we'll be able to support this without coordination. And so communications and standards is exactly what allows that to happen. So with that, I'll turn it back to Dylan to take over the show. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. And I want to highlight here by going through first the protocol standards with SunSpec Modbus, Secure SunSpec Modbus in 23.5, and then transitioning to talking about the drivers of deployment with growing loads from AI data centers and electric vehicles. I hope that illustrates the point that although the industry can go through periods of expansion and contraction due to various policy changes and changes in regulations, the gears of industry, of technology development, and the diffusion of innovation globally are not slowing down and not going anywhere. Sort of the macro long-term view, there is no putting the genie back in the bottle. These loads and these generation sources are going to be a major significant portion of the energy mix. And there is, like I said, this is the direction that the global energy industry and the market is going, regardless of what's happening kind of at the micro level. Which brings us now to the kind of next point, is that these standards are a critical path, not just for the industry, but also for individual companies' growth, sustainability, and success. So for there to be a significant portion of the global energy demand be served by distributed sources, there has to be a level of interoperability and standardization. This is the simple fact of any sort of technology advancement and diffusion of innovation. Is standardization is a key component of enabling the continued growth and expansion. And it can, from a consumer perspective, it can kind of seem sometimes like magic, just one day 4G appeared, or what have you. But in reality, it is companies and people at those companies who are leading the charge in developing the standards and in implementing the standards and then deploying them for broad market adoption that will enable market expansion and further innovation and growth. And in addition, this is how with DER, there is a component of, as being part of the energy grid, this is critical infrastructure. So there's a national security and cybersecurity component, obviously, as well. And DERs play a critical role in enabling resilience and reliability in the energy infrastructure, in the grids, national grids. And so this is absolutely, standardization is absolutely an operational necessity from both a macro and micro level. And like I mentioned earlier, the companies who take the lead and the individuals who take the lead will inevitably succeed and grow over the the long term of this industry. Now, we saw with the development of IEEE 1547 a fantastic, apparent win and step in the right direction for standardization, for enabling interoperability that would enable the industry as a whole to scale. And it certainly was a positive step in the right direction to get everybody pulling in the same direction with, with implementing SunSpec Modbus capabilities, 23.5 capabilities, or DMP3, the 3 protocols that are named in 1547. It was certainly a step in the right direction. However, we have seen through the validation mechanisms that are embedded or that come along with 1547, i.e. the UL 1741 SB standard, that the industry and the market has largely fallen short. I've been saying this for a few years now, that it is the fact of the matter is there are many UL 1741 SB certified devices, inverters, basis for these inverter-based resources that have non-compliant, non-interoperable communication interfaces on them, because the minimum core standard testing criteria, UL 1741 SB, does not do any sort of protocol validation and to ensure the quality of these communication interfaces. And not only have we seen inverters get this mark with poorly implemented 1547 interfaces, I've recently learned of a few manufacturers that have the SB mark that don't even have 1547 interfaces on them. That are still on the old, the old SunSpec Modbus, models, the old 100 series models, where 1547 very explicitly states you have to have these 700 series models and you have to have the 1547 profile implemented. We have seen a handful of companies, more than about 10 inverter companies that have gone ahead and achieved SunSpec Modbus for 1547 certification. And we know for a fact that these devices are actually interoperable in lab testing and in field testing. So we know that the minimum type testing in SB is delivering non-interoperable broken devices into the marketplace. And this is, in fact, a real risk to the industry that will hold it back and encourage the regulations and policies that slow down and hold back the continued diffusion and growth of this technology. So, both as a citizen of the industry, for the good of the industry, we need to be building quality implementations and doing full protocol validation and certification to ensure interoperability, but also on our own individual companies. There is still right now at this point in time, a competitive advantage if you actually have a high quality certified communication interface. All of the SunSpec Modbus test procedures are freely open out in the public. All the compliance criteria is really open out in the public. And we know that if people use these, that they work and they are interoperable, and they hold back the tide of regulations and the buildup of implementations and integration costs.
Dylan, I would like to add a comment here.
Sure.
Since the inception of SunSpec, one of our key goals, or probably the key goal, is to achieve interoperability. And in order to achieve interoperability, we have been nurturing and bringing the marketplace and the industry along with us, all the way to the point where we achieved international standard status in 2020. So great achievement. Now, during that period of time, Dylan and I have differed in terms of how hard to hit this point. And it's, at some point, I've sort of cautioned him. It's like, maybe don't go too far in terms of admonishing the industry. Well, it turns out he's right. And I can tell you that I just returned from another industry meeting just prior to this one on this very topic. And I would say that we are at an inflection point in the industry where either we get our act together on interoperability or the industry is going to suffer. And when I say the industry, I mean all those that are playing it, whether you're a supplier, an operator, a utility manager at the grid, or as a regular old citizen of the United States who expects to pay a moderate amount of money for the power that they get. And my goodness, with the abundance of free power, the price of energy should be going down. We're going in the opposite direction. So we're ready for a course correction here. And so I want to tell you, Dylan, I applaud your efforts in this area, and I encourage the rest of the industry to get on board. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, I'm keeping an eye on the clock. I might have belabored that point a bit too long, but thank you. So let's continue on. So I think I already addressed why this matters. Standardization across any industry is always a core component that enables the overall industry growth, and it's a core component where the winners, the successful companies, have taken a leadership role in not only in the development but the implementation and deployment of standards. And so now transitioning into some of the cybersecurity topics, which I hope we'll see are all tied together, because as we're deploying these new inverter-based resource assets, we are networking them up using these standard communication protocols. By networking them up, we are also, of course, introducing new vulnerabilities and avenues of attack for nation states, extortionists, insider threats, and so on. I think what I've seen, kind of a high-level observation in my time in the industry, is the DER industry has evolved through multiple stages. In the early stages, DER solar power was discussed in terms of an environmental solution, in terms of carbon emissions, and just the theme of environmentalism was the driving force for the DER industry. At some point, solar and energy storage and so on became more competitive, and we saw a large volume of capital flow into the industry, and the kind of center of gravity and how we talked about it became more about cost competitiveness and dollar value, dollar per kilowatt, and stuff like that. And it is absolutely the case that the DER industry has achieved parity and in many cases advantage in terms of value generation compared to traditional fuel sources. I think now, actually, we are entering kind of a third phase where the center of discussion and gravity around the continued development of the DER and the solar industry is going to be around national security and national competitiveness. It's always been there because obviously the energy grid is a core component of what everybody's day-to-day lives depends on. But now that we are the volume of new assets is over 90% is inverter-based resources. These assets are more and more being connected and networked up. We're seeing that this becomes a critical part of national security and competitiveness as well because of that. And so yeah, I think that's where we're going next is nailing this question of if we're going to continue to have this volume of new assets be connected, how are we going to do this safely? And in the previous phases, cybersecurity has been a policy question, best practices question. Now, this again is coming to the point where we have to actually proactively incorporate this into our product design, our system design, and the design of these systems and communications, in order to not hold back the growth of the industry, and avoid the potential for policy changes and regulations to hold us back and put limits on how much we can sell and connect these systems to the grid. And that's why, again, this needs to be a core part of your individual company's corporate strategy and product strategy.
And Dylan, if I may make a remark, I just posted a link on the chat about the recent attack reported in Poland on their renewable energy network. One example of the most recent reporting from December that talks about how energy systems are being attacked in the areas of conflict. Mm-hmm. In the current geopolitical landscape, given where we stand, I think this problem is even more important, given that the majority of the supply chains are linked to foreign entities of concern or fiat countries. And as those countries end up becoming their adversaries for the United States, or globally, quite honestly, I mean, this is actually now coming to front of the center, right? Like we need to secure our stuff. Exactly. And also, I also want to highlight that from the U.S. Congress, there has been letters that are written to the Congress to ban importing inverters from certain countries of concern if they don't meet the compliance regulations or requirements that are required to secure this infrastructure. For this exact reason, we've done this with telecom equipment. Folks see inverters in the same light.
Right. Thanks, Vishnu. Yeah, exactly right. We're seeing cyber attacks, and traditional cyber attacks on the grid have been mostly from extortionists and blackmail, and now we're seeing nation state using this as a weapon as well.
And also the reason why SunSpec Alliance decided to invest in building out this Secure SunSpec Modbus interface, because historically that was an interface that was being targeted, just Modbus in general.
That's right. That's right, and that's actually the next topic is the DER security and identity and trust frameworks. So this is one of the main areas where SunSpec and its members have identified an appropriate role for us to play as the collective that develops the communication interfaces, how we're going to secure that, and actually developing identity and trust frameworks is a natural follow-on. So SunSpec previously stood up the first ever IEEE 23.5 public key infrastructure, and in partnership with Secure G, and that is available. It's now has been in deployment. We're seeing more and more manufacturers come online with that here beginning of 2026 as California and other jurisdictions go forward with actually deploying these 23.5 networks. In addition, as Vish already just now alluded to, as over the internet Modbus communication becomes something that is potentially used in new business cases and use cases, we again will be standing up a public key infrastructure to support developers and manufacturers who are seeking to use this communication pathway. So we can do this in a secure way, and we can continue to scale the industry efficiently.
Dylan, 10-minute warning.
Thank you very much. So again, this is a vital importance to enable mutual authentication to ensure that nobody is bad actors are attempting or successfully infiltrating these DER networks. This is particularly important, finally kind of coming to the conclusion here is that we are seeing with the gears of industry, the growing demand generated from load for inverter-based resources and the reliance of that continued deployment of DERs. We're seeing this happen globally, where with 1547 being instituted in the US, Canada, and parts of Mexico, we're also seeing India adopt parallel 1547 with the same communication protocols. Australia, obviously they leapfrogged California in terms of their 23.5 deployments, but we're also seeing their default communication pathway being SunSpec Modbus within the systems as well. Europe has a quickly ramping up push to deploy 23.5 networks and retrofit existing systems to be accessible via 23.5, as well as other Asian countries as well. So for your own corporate strategy, nailing this question of leading the way, of being a implementer, being an implementer and supporting these protocols will enable you to access the global market and ensure your own competitiveness on a global stage, and navigate any sort of regional turbulence that you might see. And so that's why I think that this matters, is that this is for your own company's competitiveness and long-term sustainability. Having a sustainable business model, it depends upon having done a high-quality job of applying these standards to ensure that you are competitive and can enter and compete in any of these global DER markets. To getting into the wrap-up phase here now, so a little bit of a plug for SunSpec. At the end of 2025, we held a 6-part webinar series covering many of these topics in much greater detail. I'm going to actually go ahead and pass this off to Sam Reed, our VP of Content and Marketing, here to give us a little bit more of a detailed description of some of these activities.
Great, thanks, Dylan. I'm actually going to cruise through these next series of slides pretty quickly here, so we still have about 5 minutes for questions. So just to piggyback on what Dylan was saying, the SunSpec Connect webinar series, it was a 6-part series that focused on the technical, policy, and market forces shaping the DER deployment standards adoption in 25. We kicked it off right after RE Plus with a forward-looking trends discussion, and then we moved into deep dives on the energy transition, 2030.5, post-quantum cybersecurity, data standardization through Orange Button, and more. We had a great mix of diverse speakers. The speakers were from technical experts, CEOs, industry leaders, all working hands-on in these areas every day. And so looking ahead, we'd like to invite more members to help shape these future sessions. If you have a real-world use case or deployment stories or a perspective that the industry needs to hear, we'd love to feature you in future webinars. So please reach out to me, sam@sunspec.org, and we can coordinate on that moving forward. And then if we just want to go to the next one quickly. So for those of you who are new here, we thought that we might highlight these membership benefits. Membership is how organizations and individuals move from tracking standards to shaping them. So feel free to scan this code or email Aaron Mahan, our VP of Membership and Regulatory Affairs, at aaron@sunspec.org to learn more. And then just moving on briefly to the next one. So just wanted to reiterate that this webinar was presented in partnership with Intersolar and Energy Storage North America. Their flagship event will be held February 18th to 20th in San Diego. The SunSpec team is going to be there. We'll be on site participating both in the conference program and in the exhibit hall, where you can find us at booth 4017. So you're invited to attend with our partner discount, which offers 20% off a conference pass or free exhibit hall access. Just use code SunSpec, all one word, during registration at IESNA.com. You can find additional details on our website there. And again, feel free to email me, sam@sunspec.org, if you have any questions. And now we'll kick it back to you guys for your questions to Dylan and the team.
You're so much more efficient than me, Sam. I appreciate it. So yeah, let me just reiterate, the call to action here is to join the SunSpec Alliance. Come and see us at Intersolar and Energy Storage North America. We'll be at booth 4017. We'll have this fantastic panel where we're gonna, the content we presented today is a kind of a high-level summary of the various themes and topics that will be addressed and discussed in greater detail by more in-depth industry experts than myself, with Mark Vish and Dr. Dante. So come and see us there. And with that, let's see if we have any time for questions. We've got about 4 minutes.
Yeah, it looks like we have 2 questions in the chat already.
All right, I'm looking at it. The first one I see from Larry Trong. Is it an either or to use Secure SunSpec Modbus and IEEE 23.5, or are there use cases where one uses both? There are certainly use cases where you would use both.
Dylan, if I may add, because I have a thought here, particularly, so the idea here is that Modbus is typically used inside of the plant. It is certainly used from plant to grid operator, but it's primarily used inside the plant. Where this really comes into play with Secure Modbus, I think, is with the larger systems, in particular, where you want to secure those links. And why is because you're attaching very large portions of generation, maybe 2 megawatts at a chunk, and where even though you have a fence around the outside of the plant, there's a way to do eavesdropping. And so if that network is communicating in the clear, that represents a vulnerability. So that's a very specific use case, but there are others.
Right. Yeah, I would say the 23.5 protocol is primarily addressing the utility controls of DR assets and aggregated assets as well. Whereas the Secure SunSpec Modbus would be used to communicate with a single site or microgrid over the internet. We have also seen a common pattern where you might even go, the utility will have a 23.5 server speaking to a 23.5 aggregator, and that 23.5 aggregator might be communicating with the individual system using some other protocol like Secure SunSpec Modbus. So there's different use cases and applications. You can see the standard itself, the Secure SunSpec Modbus. Near the end, there is a list out of 4 envisioned potential use cases. But ultimately, it'll be up to the industry to determine how communicating Modbus over the public internet will be applied. It is a new development. It's a new innovation. So by developing this standard, we've enabled the industry to do that. And what it does with it, we'll see. We're excited to see.
Yeah, with regard to the question about the Goose protocol, I would say basically that's we deal with transports as they come, but let's deal with that question offline. I want to make sure that we have time for a word from our sponsor.
Yeah, Rob, please do. Why don't you close out the show for us?
No, I covered the piece. He's not able to.
Oh, Rob wasn't able to make it. Okay.
All right.
I see.
I'll take up the time here if there's any more questions that anyone has.
Yeah, it looks like.
Larry had one more comment. I believe 2030.5 includes an energy profile for more advanced control and management of DER.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. And again, I think this is where you're talking about the system to the grid operator, right? So that particular protocol that's where that shines, is to convey things like pricing signals, support for flexible interconnect, where you're doing curtailing and so forth, and participating in energy markets for ancillary services. So it definitely is a dominant protocol globally in that area.
Yeah, 23.5 would be for issuing the commands, and then SunSpec Modbus within the system. That's where all the different values and get stored and communicated back in response, and orchestrates the commands as they're received from some other 20.5 utility server. So we are at time. So thanks again, everybody, for your time and attention today. Please do come and join us at Intersolar and Energy Storage North America. This panel will be on February 18th at 10:30 a.m. Use our discount code if you haven't registered yet, and come also meet us in person at the booth 4017. And of course, as always, join the Alliance and get your product certified. And with that, I thank you for your time, and thanks everybody else for your Vish and Tom and Sam for your contributions here as well.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.